Hello there and welcome to today's video in which I'm talking about two celebrities and their takes on autism. And the first is Robbie Williams. And Robbie Williams, for those who don't know, is an ex-member of boy band Take That, who were really popular in the 90s. They're still popular now, but he's very well known here. And Robbie was at a launch for his clothing brand quite recently, and I think he was at a Q&A session at this launch, and he said, I have ADHD and I just found out I have a bit of autism as well, which I actually effing love because it explains so much. When are we ever going to get over this bit of autism thing? It's really depressing, isn't it, that we're still going over this kind of trope, really. And I know before various people come at me that Robbie has his own brand of humour, and I suspect he does use humour as a way to deflect, as many people do, and I do. But I think in using this kind of language, it really is, it's not helpful at all to autistic people. We know that you can't be a bit autistic. You either are autistic or you're not autistic. I think the use of tropes like I'm a bit autistic or everybody's a bit autistic are so harmful because they do nothing to help the autistic community. It only perpetuates myths further and actually appeases neurotypical people who have their own preconceived ideas about autism. And we can see this in any social media comments section that are reporting on this story. And I won't even show them to you because I'm sure you can imagine what they're like. It's an absolute cesspit of ableism, and it's just so frustrating. I think also in talking about autism so flippantly, it really does discourage autistic people from either seeking diagnosis or putting in the research to discover that they're autistic, which is such a shame because we know as autistic people what this self-discovery can do. It can really help us understand our lives from this whole new understanding of being autistic. And of course this can really help in terms of our own mental health. I just feel like Robbie has really minimised the seriousness of autism here, and what could have been a really brilliant opportunity to raise awareness about autism, that's just been taken away. Robbie goes on to say, it's my get out of jail free card now, and all the weird stuff that I do, I just say, sorry, I'm autistic. Clearly, autism is not a get out of jail free card, and I just think, what a thing to say. It implies that we can go about our lives and do what we like, and everything that we do is consequence free, and we know that the reality is the complete opposite of that. I just really wish that Robbie has thought about what he was saying here, because it really is it's just so damaging. Robbie was on the podcast I'm ADHD, No You're Not last year, before his autism diagnosis, and he said, I'm an Olympian at masking because what I managed to do, to my detriment as well, is I will look full of bravado and look pompous and look smug and do these grand gestures, which have worked for me because they put my face on the poster and people still buy tickets. But actually what's happening is I feel like the opposite of that all the time. So Robbie was obviously describing autistic masking during this podcast. And I really wish that this was the kind of stuff that he could have spoken about at this Q&A session to really inform people what being autistic is like. He also revealed he often has intrusive thoughts, explaining, I was just walking down the road the other day and I realised that these intrusive thoughts are inside Tourette's. It just doesn't come out. Well, I think many of us deal with intrusive thoughts, don't we? As autistic people and ADHD people, and certainly OCD people will deal with intrusive thoughts, but To describe them as inside Tourette's is so dismissive of people with actual Tourette's. Tourette's syndrome can be such a debilitating condition for people, and I wish Robbie would just do a bit of research. I Swear is such a brilliant movie about the life of John Davidson, who is a Tourette's advocate. And I really wish Robbie would use different language in terms of describing his intrusive thoughts. But in terms of Robbie, I really hope that this new diagnosis helps him to understand his whole life, no doubt, through this new understanding of being autistic. But I do want to acknowledge the autistic celebrities out there who are doing some great work in terms of autism education. I'm thinking here of Chris Packham, Kat Burns, who's a singer-songwriter and autism campaigner, and Fern Brady, who is a comedian and author of Strong Female Character, which is about her life as an autistic woman. But not every autistic celebrity either wants or needs to be an autism advocate. I just would appreciate that when they do talk about autism, the information that they're giving is at least correct. So now I want to talk about Anthony Hopkins, or Sir Anthony Hopkins, as he's also made some comments about autism, and I think he actually made them at the end of last year, and I really wanted to cover it at that stage, but I was working on other videos at that point. I didn't have any time, so I thought this video would be a good opportunity to revisit what Anthony said. So I'm going to be referring to this article here by the BBC, which focuses on Anthony's autobiography, We Did OK Kid. He writes that his wife Stella believes he is on the autism spectrum, which is likely right given my proclivity for memorisation and repetition and my lack of emotionality, but he says he prefers the term cold fish. I don't know about you, but I prefer autism to cold fish. But I think what is interesting about his book and this article is that Anthony is kind of acknowledging that he's autistic, although he prefers cold fish. And from my understanding, or certainly from my research, I don't think he's had a formal diagnosis, although he might, but he's chosen to keep this private. But from our understanding, he seems to think at least he could be autistic. However, in this article by The Standards, which I think is covering an interview that Anthony gave to The Times, he says, "Well, I guess I'm cynical because it's all nonsense. It's all rubbish. ADHD, OCD, Asperger's, blah, blah, blah," he says. "Oh God, it's called living. It's just being a human being, full of tangled webs and mysteries and stuff that's in us, full of warts and grime and craziness. It's the human condition. All these labels, I mean, who cares? But now it's fashion." I just don't understand his shift here from the time when he was writing his autobiography to when he's now being interviewed by the media about his biography and his thoughts on being autistic. What changed? His flagrant disregard for what seems like all neurodivergent people is deeply unpleasant. And of course it's not rubbish. Where is he getting these opinions from, considering at one point he was perfectly happy to consider that he could be autistic? I just don't understand. And yes, it's the human condition. Autistic people are human, ADHD people are human, OCD people are human. It's just that we all meet a specific set of diagnostic criteria. And what's wrong with finding out about these kinds of things? Because it helps us to understand ourselves better. And of course, this is all coming from a very privileged, rich, white man who has no doubt filled his whole life full of accommodations to the point where he probably doesn't notice being autistic in the same way that he once did, perhaps as a child or young adult, because Anthony does talk about all of the difficulties that he's had within his biography, or certainly so it reports in the BBC article. For instance, what is startling about the memoir is the disconnect between how the world viewed the young actor and how much it was clearly missing about him. He was bullied at school for what other kids saw as his large elephant head. He was slapped around by teachers who deemed him a complete dunce. Even his parents pretty much wrote him off. So Anthony was clearly bullied at school, as many autistic children experience. For me, certainly I was bullied at school, and it seems like he was completely misunderstood by all those around him, including his own parents. Anthony goes on to say how much he's struggled throughout his life with alcoholism. It essentially ruins his first two marriages, and he found working really difficult in terms of directors, etc. So perhaps there was a struggle with kind of authority figures there, or perhaps hierarchy. That's the ugly side of alcoholism, he writes. It brought out a brutal side of me. I'm not proud of it at all. The anger, he believes, came from inside, from my own insecurities, being bullied at school and all the rest of it. And here he says it, I didn't like authority. And of course, many autistic people will relate to much of what Anthony's saying here. Being bullied is a very common experience, which leads to feelings of frustration and insecurity. And through this, many of us have difficulties around authority figures, and many of us have issues with alcohol or other substance abuse. And certainly for me, I think why I wanted to talk about Anthony is that all of this reminds me of my own dad, and I'm convinced that my dad was autistic, and particularly since I've put a whole lot of time and effort into researching autism since my own autism diagnosis 2 years ago. And it has helped me perhaps understand my dad perhaps in a slightly different light, because we did not get on. My dad was a very difficult man, and sometimes I wonder, if my dad were still alive, if I had told him that I was autistic, what he would say. And to be honest, I don't think it would be very much different to what Anthony says here about it all being rubbish. I do think this is how he would have responded, and I don't know how I would have reacted to that, in all honesty, because I've not disclosed to hardly anybody actually that I'm autistic to people in real life, because I just don't see anybody. So I've not had that resistance, or that harsh resistance, from somebody as yet. However, YouTube more than makes up for this, because I'm regularly told I'm not autistic. And I just think it's a shame that Anthony Hopkins has got all of these accommodations in place. He feels like he hasn't worked a day in his life because he enjoys his work so much. And if you're doing what you love and you enjoy as an autistic person, that can bring around autistic flow. You're immersed in your special interest, and to not want to afford this to other people by not recognizing that autism, ADHD, or OCD is something that I just don't understand at all. I just think that there's so much healing that can come about from a late diagnosis of autism or ADHD or whatever, that's would make so much sense to a person's younger self or inner child. For me personally, that's what this whole channel has been about, to tap into my younger self and how difficult I found life. I just didn't want to be here for very many of my younger years, and to finally now know that I am autistic, albeit in middle age, it has brought around so much healing for me, and for that I'm eternally grateful. I think it's interesting that Anthony named his autobiography We Did Okay Kids, because I think it is speaking to his inner child. But ultimately, I really wish that he could see that his newly formed opinion about autism is just wrong. And also the last thing that I want to mention is this thing around labels, because we often hear that, and I see it in my comments section from time to time. Why does the label matter so much to you? It's not the label that matters. It's meeting this set of diagnostic criteria that matters, because it finally can help you explain so much about yourself and your whole life. I spent so many years just feeling utterly confused about myself, why I didn't fit in and why I felt so fundamentally different to other people. And now I know why. I'm autistic, and yes, it's a word, and yes, it could be described as a label, but that's not what matters to me. It's meeting this set of criteria that does. So I've gone off on a bit of a ramble there, but it's something that I've wanted to talk about since the end of last year when these articles were published, and yeah, I've done it now. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that I've covered today, or anything that Robbie Williams or Anthony Hopkins has said. By all means, leave them down below. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far. Comments would always be appreciated. And if you don't know what to say, leave me an orange heart for friendship down below. And I'll see you again soon.